We're going to get underway. Today we're going to begin the Parsha of Korach. I say begin because we'd like to look closely at the first opening passage of Parashat Korach. Of course, Korach, the Parsha that bears the name of Korach, is dominated by the infamous uprising of Korach. He was the original insurgent who sought to challenge the leadership of Moshe and of Aharon, and of course he bit the dust ultimately, and many of the Mefarshim, including ha-Hayyim, as we shall see, they marvel at what possessed him, what motivated him, or what made him feel as if his efforts would win the support of the Jewish people, and certainly the support of Hashem as well. Of course, it didn't win either support, although, as we shall see, he did have a certain amount of advocates or acolytes within the Jewish people. So ha-Hayyim starts with an observation that Rashi and many of the Mefarshim make at the very beginning of the parsha. Veikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kahas ben Levi v'dasan v'aviram b'nei Aliyah v'on ben Peles b'nei Reuven. Now, this opening passage mentions the name of Korach and traces his lineage back 4 generations. So it mentions Korach and Yitzhar and Kahas and Levi, and it mentions Dasam and Aviram from the tribe of Bnei Eliav, and this own Ben Peles as well, who we don't know that much about, from the tribe of Reuven. So basically, we have Korach as the ringleader, and he has the support, and he has sort of as his lieutenants these 2 people, Dasan Va'aviram, and then On Ben Peles. Now, the last of them somehow drops out, and there's a famous medrash how his wife saved him, which I'm sure is a worthy subject for our exploration on another time. But ha-Hayyim doesn't actually doesn't go into that particular feature. But what he does wonder is about the name of this person Korach, by which I mean, why mention Ben Yitzhar, Ben Kaz, Ben Levi, V'dasan V'aviram? Why sort of mention his lineage all the way back to Levi himself? It would have been sufficient to say Ve'kach Korach Ben Yitzhar L'matei Levi. It would have been enough to say that Korach ben Yitzhar, who was from the tribe of Levi. That would be the normal way to designate him. But the Torah specifies Ben Kahas, Ben Levi as well. Moreover, there's a bigger problem, and that is that the words Vayikach Korach suggest that Korach took something, but the Torah doesn't tell us what he took. Not in this verse, not in the following verse, doesn't appear at all. It says Korach took, Korach, the son of Yitzhar, etc., took, and he was together with these other people, and they arose before Moshe, and they had another 250 people of Bnei Israel, but the Torah doesn't say what did he take. So, as I said, many of the Mefarshim are troubled by this, including Rashi, and Rashi says, "Lakach es atzmo letzad echad." He took himself, and Rashi here is following the sages who say, "Veikach Korach." What did he take? He took himself. Veikach Korach. In other words, it emphasizes that he separated himself from among the Jewish people. Now, there are many who complained about Moshe, but no one who actually personally attacked Moshe and proposed to depose Moshe and take his place. Korach is the first one that the Torah tells us about to have such an idea. So that's when the Mefarshim Veikach Korach, he took the initiative. In the last decade or two, we have an expression which I don't remember growing up in the English language, proactive. We've got reactive and we've got proactive. So that's the connotation here, Vayikach Korach, that Korach took something. It's a way of saying he took the initiative and he had the temerity to rise up against Moshe, etc. This is hinted to in Onkelos as well, for those who have the Chumash with the translation of Onkelos. Traditional Chumash will normally have that as well, including the Art Scroll, even though it's in English, but it does still have, together with the Hebrew text, the Onkelos translation. So Onkelos says, V'ispaleg Korach. The word V'ispaleg comes from the word pelaga. A miflaga, we mentioned a few times, a miflaga in modern Hebrew is a political party. So V'ispaleg means he divided. That is to say, he separated himself from within the people of Israel in order to take issue and to challenge the authority of Moshe. The problem is, says ha-Hayyim, this no doubt is very true in the sense that it does describe what he did. However, it's not really the meaning of the word vayikach. V'ispaleg, to divide or to like to fragment or to introduce a schism or sectarianism. This may be a description of what he did, but it is not the translation of the word vayikach, and he took. So this first question that that ha-Hayyim asks, what did he take? And that he took himself requires an explanation. Secondly, why does it mention the names of all of these tzaddikim? So the Medrash says that Korach, he was called Korach because asa karcha b'Yisrael. Karcha means like to rend, to tear, or to gouge, to disrupt. So he disrupted the Jewish people. Ben Yitzhar, so Yitzhar actually means what? Who can tell me what is the actual meaning of the word Yitzhar? It has a meaning, straightforward meaning. Yitzhar means oil, means olive oil, is Yitzhar. Tirosh v'Yitzhar. Tirosh is the juice of the grape. Tirosh is the grape, and Yitzhar, Tirosh chavi Yitzharach. Yitzhar is the olive, the oil from an olive. So the Medrash says, and Rashi mentions it here, that Yitzhar, or perhaps it is not in Rashi, but it is in the Medrash, that Yitzhar refers to something negative, and it is interpreted homiletically that okay, we'll get back to that in a moment. But ha-Hayyim says, why mention them all together? So Rashi famously tells us that Yaakov is not mentioned. And elsewhere we find the name of Yaakov is mentioned in the lineage of Korach. But here, where it describes the uprising of Korach, Yaakov is not mentioned. So Korach's lineage is traced back to Levi, but doesn't go back as far as Yaakov. Says ha-Hayyim, yeah, fine, Yaakov is not there. Yaakov, I'm sure, is grateful. He prayed to Hashem, don't mention my name. When it comes to the uprising of Korach, leave me out. But what about all the other tzaddikim? Levi was righteous. Gahas was righteous. Even Yitzhar was righteous. Even Korach, it seems, was a very talented, capable, gifted person with great potential. So why mention, why sully the names of his antecedents by associating them with Korach altogether? He says, "Va'ani mitzpaleh gam al otam shehizkir." The ones which are mentioned, I marvel at it. So it's not enough just to say, yeah, Yaakov managed to escape the unsavory association with Korach. But what about all the others who are mentioned? Then he asks about Das and Va'avirim. He says, who are these guys? What's their importance? Korach is described in terms of his pedigree. He was a nephew of Moshe, and he was jealous of Moshe. Okay, Moshe and Aaron, he was jealous of them. But Das and Va'avirim, what are they all about? Then the fourth question he asks is, why does it say, look closely at the next pasuk. I hope you have a chumash with you. Vayakumu lifnei Moshe va'anashim ibnei Yisrael chamishim u'masayim nisyei yeda kriyei moed anshe Shem. So what is the meaning of this word vayakumu? They arose. So if it means to say, to suggest the insolence, the arrogance that these people had to rise up against Moshe, if that is the case, then why mention it here in the middle? Why mention Korach and his immediate lieutenants? And then it says, and they arose, and then there were 250 men of Israel. It should mention Vayakumu with respect to all of them. Why does it say Vayakumu only in that point? So those are the four questions he asked. Let me tell you his answer. I think is fascinating. He asked, how did Korach even get this idea? How did he imagine he would be successful in this insurrection? So the first thing he says, the ha-Hayyim says, is that Vaikach Korach means he took his lineage. He took his maybe pedigree, maybe he had a document that demonstrated that he was from the most distinguished stock within the Jewish nation. But in any case, he was very proud of his uh, ancestors, and maybe we could say rightfully so. But the point here is that his very talent, his very potential, his very greatness that was latent within him was his downfall. That's what he took. He took the fact that he's the son of Yitzhar and all of the other generations, and that is what that is the reason that he bit the dust. And he says, ha-Hayyim explains like this: Yitzhar was the eldest of the sons of Kahas. So Yitzhar, his father, was the eldest, and Kahas was the most distinguished of the sons of Levi. Levi had three sons: Gershon, Kahas, and Merari. Now, although Kahas was not the eldest, but he was the most distinguished. He was the most distinguished in the sense that he and his descendants within the tribe of Levi were charged with the most prestigious and the most holy, the most probably sought after role, which is to transport the holiest objects of the Mishkan. And the rabbis say that Korach himself was one of those who carried the ark. The actual ark of the covenant was carried by Korach. And Korach and his immediate brethren and cousins, let's say, from the sub-tribe of Kahas were the most distinguished. So Korach thought, I must be hot stuff if I come from such distinguished pedigree. So he said, my father was the eldest of the sons of Kahas. Kahas was the greatest of the sons of Levi. And Levi, of course, was the most distinguished of the 12 sons of Yaakov, most distinguished in terms of spiritual greatness. And this is why Levi was like the rabbinic tribe. Levi was the tribe that was designated to have all of the important spiritual leadership positions. So that's what Korach took, and it was because of his pedigree that he felt he was deserved a bigger cut of the action. Dasan v'aviram. So although we don't know that much about them according to what the Torah tells us, we do know clearly that they were the sons of Eliav, and they were therefore among the great of the tribe of Reuven. What was special about Reuven? Within the 12 sons of Yaakov, what was notable about Reuven and the tribe of Reuven?
He was the firstborn.
The firstborn, absolutely. He was a firstborn. So their gripe was that if anyone is going to be the leader of the Jewish people, it should be someone from the tribe of Reuven. Reuven is the firstborn of Yaakov. So Dasan v'aviram, that's why they got on board. What about the other 250? So ha-Hayyim says, this is why it says Vayakumu after mentioning Korach, Dasan, Aviram, and On ben Peles. And that's when it says Vayakumu, because they were the ones who had the greatest gripe and the greatest sense of entitlement and the greatest, therefore, in their own imagination, the greatest legitimate claim to displace Moshe. The other 250, although the Torah implies that they were people of stature as well, we have the idea they were maybe members of the Sanhedrin, because each tribe, each of the 12 tribes had its own minor Sanhedrin of 23. So these 250 maybe were all the members of the Sanhedrin from the various tribes. And the Torah says clearly, actually, it's not just a Midrashic tradition, the Torah says, Nisi'ei Eda, the greatest of the congregation, Kuri'ei Mo'ed, those who are summoned for gatherings of importance, and Sheshem, men of renown. So they were people who were in a prominent position of influence, but they didn't have the same delusions of grandeur to the same degree as Korach and his immediate circle, his immediate lieutenants. So they were there to support Korach, but Korach and his lieutenants, they directly confronted Moshe. That's why it says Vayakumu. So what we see here, I think, is an interesting idea, and I'm not saying it's entirely novel. We'll see in a moment, I think, a more profound approach. But nevertheless, I think there's an important lesson here. The Torah here is teaching, especially according to ha-Hayyim's insight, that what did Korach take? He took his Sefer Yikus, he took his genealogy. That is to say that because of his distinguished pedigree, that's why he was arrogant, that's why he had a sense of entitlement, that's why his like downfall was assured because of his very talent, because of his wisdom, and he was very clever, and he was very wealthy as well, and all of that can easily go to a person's head, and that actually was responsible for his downfall. So here we see the limitations of Yikus and even the pitfalls of Yikus. I know I've told you a few times about the uh, people who were talking and boasting about their great yichus, and there was someone there from very humble background, and they said to him, "Well, Beryl, can you tell us a wise saying of your father?" So he said, "Yes, my father was a baker, and he used to say that fresh bread is better than stale bread." They also say about yichus that it's like a potato. The most important part of it is in the ground. So, Yikus has its limitations. My one other quip in that category is someone was saying, my father was so great, he knew the day of his death. So they said to him, really? How did he know? Who told him? He said, the judge. So there are different types of yichus, but the point is that yichus itself can be a pitfall in its own right. I just want to indulge the subject for just a moment by relating a little anecdote which I heard at a bar mitzvah. I don't think there's anything wrong with mentioning who the bar mitzvah boy was. He is today a rabbi of some distinction. He's Gershon Dunner. He's the son of Esti and my late friend Benzi Dunner, Lahavdu ben Chaim L'chaim. And Gershon is, I say, today's quite a Talmid Chacham. At his bar mitzvah, his uncle, who it's actually his father's uncle, is Dayan Dunner. You may have heard of Dayan Dunner. So he was the brother of Abba Dunner, who lived here in Golders Green, spoke at Kesher many times, Abba Dunner. So Dayan Dunner is one of the great raconteurs in the rabbinic circuit, speaks all over the world. He's very, very learned, but very charismatic and a great raconteur. So he really spoke at Gershon's bar mitzvah, and he said the following. He related how not long before, it was in the aftermath of the 9/11 atrocity, and in New York and throughout America, throughout the world really, the airport authorities rushed to introduce much more stringent security methods, and they hadn't yet developed a system for efficiency. I'm not sure how well they developed it now either. And basically, travel began to take a lot longer than it ever used to before. So he related, Dayan Dunner related, how they wanted him to speak at a certain dinner or some event they're having in Brooklyn, and on a certain day. So he said, I can do it, but only if I can get to the airport in time to fly back to London on that same day or same night, whatever it was. So they said, look, we'll see if it's possible. So he worked out the latest flight he could take, whatever time it was. So he said, is it enough time? So they said, yeah, don't worry. We're going to arrange a police escort for you, and they'll take you from Brooklyn, wherever it may be, straight to the airport. We'll get police cars who can escort you all the way through all of the red lights. So stop the traffic, will take you through. The Jewish community has quite a lot of political connections in New York. Excuse me. So he said that's what they did, and however short the time availability was, he got from New York, from Brooklyn to JFK Airport in record time. He said they rushed him through the check-in, etc. He said, but when he got to the security, he said there was a Dayan Dunner, quite a tall and imposing man. He said there was a little fellow there, and he said, wait a minute. He said, you think you're a VIP? He said, take off your kapata. Said, take off your hat, take off your belt, take off your shoes. And Dayan Dunner said to Gershon Aryeh Dunner, Tim, you've got a lot going for you. You've got charm, you've got intelligence, you've got great yichus, because he does have distinguished yichus. You have to say explicitly that he comes from a very well-to-do family as well, a very highly well-regarded family. He said, but I want you to know that all of that will get you only so far in life. But there will come a time when all of that will count for nothing. whatever you are, whatever you can offer, whatever you can contribute, whatever your character is, that is what's going to determine your success or otherwise. All of that, those trappings, they're nice to have, and they may give you a certain head start, but ultimately it's only what you achieve yourself. So that's what I learned. I thought, wow, gave a brilliant drasha. I've got VIP treatment. They're rushing me through the New York traffic, but I got to that one spot, and all of my, prestige, whatever it was, counted for nothing. This little guy said, take it all off, your shoes, your belt, etc. Okay, I apologize for indulging that a little bit, but that's what comes to mind in what ha-Hayyim says about Korach. So to answer the questions, the reason all of these people I mentioned is that they were the reasons for Korach's sense of entitlement and ultimately for his downfall. Okay, Ad Kan is the first approach that ha-Hayyim proposes to understand Korach and his uprising. But then he has another approach, which he says is, I said, I've taken another look at it, and I saw the rabbis suggest that the reason that the Torah mentions Korach's antecedents is the following. Korach shasa korcha b'Yisrael, he created like a rift or gouges in Israel. Ben Yitzhar shirtiach kol haolam katsaharayim, that he boiled the whole world like midday, like we had today, very hot day. So you can imagine in the Sinai desert how hot it was. So we said means oil, olive oil, which was used for cooking and other things as well. Yitzhar comes from the word Saharayim, or is related to the word Saharayim. Saharayim means afternoon. Tzohar is clarity. So Yitzhar, fine olive oil, is clear. So Ben kahas shehika shine molidav. The word kahas is related to the word keheh, which is to like set your teeth on edge. So those who bore him, meaning his ancestors, he set their teeth on edge when they saw from the next world what he was up to. They he was like escorted to Gehenna. He was escorted to purgatory. Then the Medrash says, "V'lachshov gam ben Yaakov." Why not mention Yaakov as well? We're going back all the way to Levi. Mention Yaakov too. So the Medrash says that it could mention Yaakov Gehenna, that he, like his footsteps. The word akev means a heel. So like he walked his way into Gehenna. Why not mention Yaakov? There's that hint in the name of Yaakov as well. So Bikesh Rachamim, Yaakov foresaw this event and he prayed to Hashem, don't include me in the account of Korach's uprising. Okay, that's a medrash. Says ha-Hayyim to me, Ube'inai yipalei, lama yechaneh dvarim hara'im l'shmos hatzadikim. Why associate all of Korach's villainous behavior? Why associate it with these names of the tzaddikim? Okay, it is true that he is a son and a grandson and a great-grandson of these distinguished people. But why draw attention to it? And why did the rabbis take the names of righteous people and interpret it in such a negative way in order to contextualize what Korach was up to? And not only that, but the sage who was proposing this homiletic interpretation, that each of his forebears and his name as well are associated, somehow are interpreted for the great villainous act of mutiny that he undertook. He also thought, I'm going to include Yaakov as well. Darshan, the name Yaakov, as a reference to how Korach, with his heels, like he walked his way into Gehenna. Except that Yaakov prayed to Hashem, don't mention my name. Okay, so he was not included. What's it all about? So he says, in order to explain it, I have to make the following introduction. He says that when Hashem created the world, he says, firstly, that the way of the world is that something with great potential, something which has great holiness, if it is perverted, if it is distorted, if it is debased, if it is degraded, it's much worse than something without that potential. In other words, holiness and degradation, sanctity and villainy are two sides of the same coin. The greater the potential in something in the positive way, so if that potential is squandered, or worse, is perverted or degraded, then it's going to be much worse than a person or an object that doesn't have the same potential for sanctity. And he says the paradigm for this is a korban, is an offering, a sacrifice. So if it's offered in the correct way, it has kedusha, and it has participate in the process of eating this sacrifice or bringing it, are uplifted as a result. But if the offering, the korban, is offered with the wrong intention or at the wrong time, even something as subtle as that, or in the wrong place, or if it's left over because it has to be consumed, let's say, the same day, or maybe the day and the night that follows. If it's left over, that's called nosach. Homeostasis. It's true in nature, it's true in economics as well. There's a certain balance. And when that balance is distorted or disrupted, the whole thing is out of kilter. Okay, he says the second principle I want to establish is that a person who does wrong is rebuked or punished by the action itself. And the kedusha that he had the ability to bring to bear, to bring to the fore, if he fails or if he is unworthy, then he will find his comeuppance. He will be like rebuked or even punished by the same opportunity that beckoned to him for something positive. You could say if a person gets a windfall of 100,000 pounds and thinks, I'm going to invest it. So he gets bad investment advice and he invested in some risky venture, and the whole thing goes pear-shaped. If he's really unwise and he gets really bad advice, then he could even be on the hook for more than he's invested in some kinds of financial vehicles. So a person who invests 100,000 pounds or £1,000,000 in a prudent way could provide an income for the rest of his life if he's prudent, and with a bit of luck maybe as well. But if he squanders it, it could actually come back to bite him. If he, buys a house that costs more than that, and then he goes underwater because he can't make the payments, whatever it might be. So that's what he says, another principle. So the third principle is that the neshamos that Hashem created among the Jewish people correspond to the letters of the Torah. And then he says as follows: Da kikshebara Hashem es ha'adam bara neta echad shebo klulim kol anfei hakedusha. When Hashem created man, so he implanted within man, that is to say Adam himself, all of the greatness, all of the sanctity, all of the potential for immortality that Hashem infused within this terrestrial world, even at the level of Gan Eden. It was all given to Adam. But when he transgressed, when Adam sinned, so all of the souls that were within his own soul, or you could think of it in biological terms, those who would be descended from him, were all corrupted as well. And in accordance with the greatness of Adam's potential, so was the greatness of his degradation and those that follow from him. So what happened to mankind? Well, actually, it was pretty disastrous, because 10 generations later, the whole world was destroyed and Hashem started over again with Noach. Okay, Noach was very righteous, but even his descendants, also within a short period of time, many of them became corrupted as well, until 10 generations after Noach was Avraham Avinu. Now, says ha-Hayyim, that began with he doesn't actually mention the term, but the Kabbalists call it Olam HaTikun, the world of rectification, the process of rectifying and ameliorating and expiating the sin of Adam and actually recovering the greatness for which Adam was capable, the greatness of which mankind is capable. So Abraham was purged with 10 trials. And then Abraham had a son Yishmael, and Yishmael, so to speak, like drew off the dross of Abraham, and Yitzchak was righteous. And then Esav drew off the dross of Yitzchak, and therefore Yaakov was perfectly righteous. It doesn't mean he never sinned or never could sin. He could sin, and he did sin. And he paid a price for it. But he was essentially cleansed and purged. So in a way, this is what the rabbis say. He quotes it, the Medrash says, Shufrei de Yaakov Avinu mein Shufrei de Adam Kadma, that the beauty of Yaakov is akin to the beauty of Adam. Doesn't mean he's going to be on the cover of GQ or some objective measure or subjective measure of masculine beauty. It means that his greatness, his radiance, his state of perfection was akin to that of Adam before the sin. So Yaakov represents the greatest potential. And that's why the descendants of Yaakov are the ones who, again, have the potential to bring about the total rectification of all mankind, which we're still waiting for to be worthy of that. Okay. What happened to Korach then? So he says, according to this, and if you want to remember this thought, so pay attention to the parable or the metaphor that he uses. He says, the Ilan, I don't know if Ilan is with us on this Zoom lesson tonight, but Ilan meaning the tree is Yaakov. Yaakov is the tree. And the tree has 12 branches. That is to say, Yaakov was the father of 12 tribes. So the 12 branches of the tree. One of the tribes is Levi. One of the branches is Levi. One of those, the branch of Levi has three, like you could say the bow, and then the branch or something, 3 anafim, 3 sprigs. Gershon, Kahas, and Merari, that came out of the branch of Levi. Ukahas is one of the further branches. And Amram, Yitzhar, Chevron, Uziel are the 4 branches of Kahas. And Yitzhar was a further branch, and Korach was a sprig from that branch. Just like an actual tree that has, primary branches and then other branches, tributary, so to speak, that branch off from that. So he says, when Korach came, and unfortunately Korach's effect, maybe not his intention, but his effect was to transform the Kedusha to the opposite. The Kedusha was like corrupted. And Vihini bevo Korach lachlif anfe Kedusha v'lafoch kahuna mimekoma, when he wanted to displace Aharon and say, why should Aaron be the high priest? I want to be the high priest. So he had the effect of corrupting his own soul. And his corruption, unfortunately, was so intense that the greatness that he inherited from his father Yitzhar was also corrupted, because Yitzhar was so great. So that's how Korach was able to seize the greatness of Yitzhar and tragically to corrupt it. Instead of using it in something in a positive way, he used it in a negative way. And similarly, back. So he says that Korach. So Korach suggests, or ha-Hayyim, I think this is his own idea, and I want to tell you my interpretation of it. Maybe I'm wrong. He says Korach was called Kerach Tahor. Why is Korach? In what way is Korach, the name Korach, in what way does it hint to purity? So he doesn't elaborate. I think he means like this. Korach, Kuf, Resh, Ches, spells Kerach. Kerach is ice. If you're lucky enough to have a refrigerator or a freezer rather that makes ice, you maybe put it to good use today. So Kerach is ice. How is ice a symbol of purity? It actually is. ice is a symbol of purity because, without going into the detail we don't have time for, in order for a mikveh, the waters of a mikveh, to be halachically effective and valid, you can't just turn on the tap and fill up your mikveh that way. It'd be much too easy. The waters for the mikveh have to be maim chaim, have to be living waters, or at least water that was never transported in a container, in a vessel. So the way we normally do it is with rainwater. So when a mikveh is first built, it takes however many weeks or months to have enough rainwater that fills the mikveh, and then we managed in a hygienic way to ensure that the mikveh that actually is utilized is perfectly clean and it's chlorinated. But the original mikveh water is held in a separate chamber, and that is rainwater. That is water which is natural. How about if you want to make a mikveh in a place like Phoenix, Arizona? I don't know if anyone here has ever been to Phoenix. If you ever heard of Phoenix, Arizona, it doesn't rain in Phoenix, Arizona. They had a song, "It Never Rains in Southern California." In Southern California, it does. It never rains in Phoenix, hardly ever. You could wait years for any rain. So how do they make a mikveh in Phoenix? Such, I know the rabbi who made a mikveh in Phoenix. Without going into all the complexity of it, one of the methods is to take ice. And that's what they did. They brought ice from Colorado, from the mountains. They put it in a truck or more than one truck. They filled up ice and snow and everything, and in the winter, and they trucked it down to Arizona. They put it in the mikveh, and when that ice melted, that water had the status of Maim Tahorim. Even the water that was transported in the back of a lorry would not be suitable for mikveh, but ice is. So anyway, that's what he says. So Korach was initially innately tahor. He had the sanctity, the purity. Ben Yitzhar, who could illuminate the world ha-Hayyim, like in the midday, the illumination, the brightness. Ben Kahas, Makeshini Kol Roav Gudula, whoever saw him, his teeth would be set on edge. Like you get goosebumps sometimes if you hear something or you see something or even contemplate something, if it's very wondrous. So maybe you get goosebumps if it's horrendous, but also if it's wondrous or very exciting or very inspiring as well. So that's Kahas has that implication. Ben Levi. So Levi was the companion, meaning the word Levi is from the word like Melave Malka. He was a companion to Hashem himself. And now the question is, what about Yaakov? Of course, Yaakov is so great, but Yaakov, who was so very great, did the corruption of Korach even affect Yaakov? So the Medrash is suggesting it could have mentioned Yaakov as well. But Yaakov prayed, don't mention my name, because Yaakov, the name Yaakov, Ikev leGehenim, it's like the footsteps of Gehenim. He like traipsed right into Gehenim. So therefore, Yaakov was excluded. And finally, we'll conclude with this. There are a few minutes over time as well. Finally, he says that the Talmud in Tractate Sanhedrin records a fascinating dispute, a fascinating discussion and dispute as to whether Korach and his cohorts will ultimately earn a place in the world to come. Do they have a chelik in Olam Haba? So the Mishnah very famously says, Kol Yisrael Yeshem chelik l'Olam Haba. All of Israel has a portion in the world to come, but you could lose the portion. Did Korach and his companions, did they lose their portion? So says ha-Hayyim that it would seem, according to the opinion, that they did not lose their portion. So because Yaakov's name was not mentioned, so even though Korach has corrupted the whole tree, each branch going back from the leaves, from the sprigs, all the way back to the main bow of Levi, he corrupted it all. He took that potential and he ruined it. But the tree itself, Yaakov, who is the tree itself, was not corrupted. So all of Korach's villainy did not extend even to Yaakov, and if it had, then he would have had no hope in the world to come ever. He would have suffered in the purgatory for all time.